Once. There we go. It's live. It's 9 o'clock, kids. It's Tuesday night. That means it's time for the Get Off My Lawn podcast. Welcome, everybody. We are glad you are here. We are going to do something that we've never actually done here before, and well, not very often. We've talked about a few, I don't know, tender subjects or touchy subjects before. You should go back and look up our abortion chat back when we were doing 2A Tuesday. That was a good discussion we had then. But tonight we're going to see what happens, and I may make everybody mad, and I might wake up tomorrow with no subscribers. You might all bail off my Facebook page. You might all quit me on YouTube. That's okay. I'd much rather say what I actually believe and have people dislike me for who I am than not say some of this and pretend like things are okay that I don't think are okay and have you like me for who I'm not. That's not okay with me. So we're going to see what happens. We will let everybody go through and get the notifications and join us here. We've got a few people joining us already live out there in the chat. Looks like we've got, of course, Sandhills Sweetheart is in the chat. She's sitting over in the producer's chair where I like to have her. She's keeping an eye on all the comments. More to come on the comments here in a little bit. We've got Justin Gibbons finally back. Welcome home, Justin. G23 is in the house. Rogue Banshee is out there and in here. Agorizer is there. Now we can start the partay. Who else is here? Carolina EDC Reviews. Mystic Guns is here. Emily L is in the house. 402 Outdoorsman, 2 Live Moo, Jay Brown, and I'm sure Blue Steel 44. I'm sure more and more will come all the time. Please leave a comment in the live chat if you're watching. Rick Nethery's in the house. If you're not commenting, we don't know you're out there, at least not on YouTube. We're working on being able to do these live on YouTube and Facebook at the same time, and Facebook I think might actually let us know when people start watching, but we don't get to see you on YouTube unless you talk to us and say hi, because we want to talk back and say hi to you. And that's what Sandhills Sweetheart does while I'm running my yap. She's actually holding it down in the chat and welcoming everybody and talking to all of you out there. So she does the typing and I do the talking, which is kind of just really a good description of our whole marriage. So, all right. Also, something new tonight, and I'll try to remember to pop this banner up a couple times tonight. But we do have a new email address that we are only going to pay attention to while we are live on these podcasts. So this will come into play more later on in the evening as I kind of explain what's happening tonight. But you can email us at sandhillslive@gmail.com. I don't have my own domain, so it's still going to be a Gmail, but sandhillslive@gmail.com. Now that I've said that, I realize I probably should have done getoffmylawn@gmail.com, but that's probably taken. So this one worked, and that is the email address. So if you, as you're listening tonight, as you're watching, if you're catching this live, go ahead and drop an email to us if you want to, sandhillslive@gmail.com. And if you have things that you want to say, that you want to voice, and you don't want to just type them out in the chat, then we will give you a chance to come in and actually tell us your experiences and the things that you've seen and heard and felt. But these links do not go out just to everybody, and we can only fit 6 people, 5 with me over here on the screen. And I can only get about 3 more waiting out in the wings to come up on the screen at a time. So if we need to shuffle people through, we will do that. We'll give people a chance to talk, and then we'll shuffle people through as we need to. But if this is a chat that you want in on while we are live, then we will get you a link. So what I need you to do when you make that email is just give us kind of just a brief summary of what it is you want to tell people about. And because we're going to do our best to screen people, and everybody's going to have to kind of follow the rules, and I'll go over those here in a second after everybody gets a chance to introduce themselves. But we'll do our best. Any call-in show on the radio has a producer out screening the calls that actually get onto the air. we're going to do our best to screen the people before we actually put you on the air too. But that being said, I can kick anybody out instantly if I need to. That also goes for the chat. So we'll get into that in a second. But first, we already have kind of a rogues gallery tonight of panelists, and hopefully we get enough people that we get to cycle everybody through tonight. But we'll let everybody go through here and say hello. And before I do that, out there in the chat, 402 Outdoorsman has said, news for you all. I just read the email tonight. Gunstreamer has shut down starting next week. So as of June 30th, that'll be the last time you can go to Gunstreamer. I just want all of you who are over there working at Gunstreamer. I can't think of all your names, Paul, Ashley, and the rest of you that I'm sorry, I forget everybody's name. We are with you. I don't know if it's just the fact due to COVID that sometimes the money isn't always coming in for everybody. That makes it hard to keep things going when things like Gunstreamer are mostly funded out of the pocket of the people that do it. So we're sad to see you go. We understand that it's not permanent. It's just until further notice. We anxiously await notice that Gunstreamer will be back up and running. But it just goes to show if everybody doesn't support some of these things, they do go away. These aren't a given. So keep that in mind, and we'll do what we can to see if we can get Gunstreamer back sooner than later. So, all right, let's give everybody a chance to say hi. First in the room tonight, we had Squibload joining us, and I know he's still at work. So if you get a chance to say hi, we'll let you do it right now.
Hi.
Hi. All right. He'll be with us more later.
I heard that the duck is supposed to work better with mobile starting this week.
Really?
So
let's hope.
Yeah,
starting this week as in already now, or starting like tomorrow?
I would think already now, but one person's, it's a rumor I heard. I didn't even go to their website to verify it. So my phone may still overheat and shut down, in which case I guess it's not now, but what I heard.
Cool. Are you at a point after we get rolling here that we can get some of your thoughts out early?
Yes, because I am working until 12:30 tonight instead of 10:30.
Oh, so, goodness.
Yeah, and we don't have any emergencies. Now that I said that, something will break.
Doggone it, you done jinxed it now. All righty. Well, we will see if we can get some of your thoughts out here early so that just in case the phone does make you shut it down, at least you've had a chance to speak your mind. And that's part of what we're going to do tonight. All right, next up, we've got, for the first time joining us tonight on the Get Off My Lawn podcast, we have got another YouTube, what do I want to say, a YouTube phenom, sensation, dude, the Rogue Banshee.
Hey, thanks for having me tonight. And what a subject to make my entrance into your podcast for the first time.
Trial by fire, right? If you stick with us and you want to come back in weeks to come after this one, then I guarantee they're going to be a lot smoother sailing than what this one could turn out to be. We'll see. All righty, but thanks for being here. So, do we call you Rogue? Do we call you Banshee? Do we call you TRB?
Yeah, you can call me Rogue. You can call me Banshee. Either one.
Frank or George.
Yeah, just don't forget to call me late to dinner.
Okay.
Mr. Banshee. Mr. Banshee.
It's Mr. Banshee.
Mr. Banshee.
Yeah, it's Mr. Banshee, which is kind of odd because Banshee is a female spirit.
It's true.
So
I don't judge here, man. It's all good.
Yeah. I identify as myself.
Unless you're a mutant. If you're one of Charles Xavier's phenoms, then Banshee, I think, was a dude. So it's okay. It's all good. We're not going to judge here. All right. Thanks for joining us. Next up, we've got Duke Liberty in the house, squirting jelly out of his squirt gun, which is still probably one of the best things you could ever get for Christmas.
Right? Or a cowboy who rides an ostrich.
I'd still rather have the squirt gun.
No, man. Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it. As always, a great bunch of folks to be around. Excited to have the conversation tonight, man. Really looking forward to it. Thanks as always.
You bet. Thanks for being here. All right. We've got the king of the Travi, Travis P11, holding it down across the state from me in the capital city.
Yep. Hey, it's always good to be here. I appreciate the invite. Thank you very much. Cheap plugs as usual. Check out my podcast Saturday mornings, 8 a.m. It's called Caliber Corner. We talk guns and ammo. But anyway, I'm always happy to be here. Thanks for saving a spot for me, man. Appreciate it.
You bet. All right. Last but not least, we've got Pat Hirsch, also in Nebraska. So we can definitely say that half of our panel so far is in Nebraska. And like I said, hopefully we get so many people wanting to join that we do see some fresh faces come through. But Pat, thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me on tonight. It's could be a supercharged little episode we have here tonight. Hopefully nothing gets too out of hand or anything, but I'm glad to be a part of it. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. And thanks for being here. All right. Now, I want to just address my mods out there in the live chat. Those of you with blue wrenches, those are also known as ban hammers. And I don't know if there's anybody. I've got a few. There's a couple of you out there. Sandhills Sweetheart is probably going to be doing most of the moderating tonight over in the chat. But out there in the chat, yes, Travis T, there are rules. When we get into this discussion, we are not going to make this something that gives food or gives more talking points to people that want to try and oppose, whatever it is that you or I may agree with. A lot of people disagree with most of what I'm going to say tonight. And I don't want this to be something where it actually fans the flames. The reason that we're going to have this chat is because it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. And just like a lot of things with recent current events, it's just everything's kind of come to a head. And I just decided, let's go ahead and see if we can sit down and have this chat. So you moderators out there, we're not going to let anybody actually say things that are blatantly racist. Now, if you have an honest question and you're trying to find out an answer, that is one thing. If you're actually going to just call people names individually or groups of people, just to call them names or to stir things up, we're not going to allow it. You're not going to get one warning. You're going to get put in timeout one time. And if it happens again, you're just going to be gone and you'll have to join us next week. There will be no appeals because that's how that works. Once you get banned, you can't come back until the next chat. So that being the case, just keep it civil. That's what we want out there in the chat. There's not going to be, and the same thing for those of us on the panel. If we get somebody in here that actually wants to disagree with us, and please come in and disagree. You're always welcome to come in and disagree with the things that I say or any of the rest of the panelists. But if you do disagree, we're not going to get into a fight. We're not going to get into name calling or attacking people. It can be passionate, but it's not going to be mean. Does that make sense to everybody? We're not going to allow that kind of crap. We're not going to allow people to get set up as kind of a gotcha type of a moment where you try and trap people by the things that you're trying to say or make them say it. Just looks like you're putting words in their mouth. That's not good. And also, as far as mic drop moments, if you come in here simply to say something to drop the mic and prove a point, you've already missed the point of the chat. And so the point is to actually sit down and have a discussion where people who are listening maybe can see a different point of view or hear a different point of view expressed than their own. And I think that's going to be healthy, and that's what we want to do. A while back, I first had the idea of doing this and long before COVID-19 or the racially charged things that are happening right now, long before this, I mean, a year ago or better, I wanted to sit down and just get a diverse panel and just have a chat that shows that we can have people who don't all look the same, sound the same, think the same, vote the same, worship the same, love the same, whatever it is. We can all sit down and just have a cool discussion where, if there's something that you want to know, it's a safe place to ask. The reason that I say that is because if I ask a question, then it's almost like, I I should just know this. Like magically, I'm supposed to just be, politically correct and socially smooth and all this. And there's a lot of things that I don't know because I've never been exposed to certain cultures or certain ways of life. And if I don't ask the questions, I don't know any other way to get the answers. So, and a lot of it's because I've never had anybody where I could just ask those questions. And case in point being some friends of mine who are gay. I don't know what it's like to be gay, and I didn't grow up with anybody who did know what it was like to be gay, or if they did, they didn't say so at the time. I've got a lot of questions, and it's not because I'm a bigot, and I might be, but I don't try to be. It's not because I have any animosity or things like that. It's just there's things that I don't understand that my brain won't wrap around unless I ask these questions and get these answers from other people's perspectives. Okay. And that can be said for anybody. It doesn't just have to do with whether somebody's gay or straight or anything in between. I'm just saying that I want to have a safe place tonight where we can say things and ask things without it blowing up on us or blowing back on us in a negative way. Unless, like I said, it's going to blow back on you in a negative way if you meant it to come out in a negative way on purpose. That's the only thing we're going to watch for tonight. But now with everything that's going on in current events, I think it's probably, I don't know. I've debated whether or not we should do this. I was going to do it a week ago and didn't do it. And even though I still don't have any panelists that have agreed to sit down, who, are from racially or religious or ethnic diverse backgrounds from me or whatever, we're still going to do this. And hopefully those of you listening will share this link so that your friends, relatives, family members, people that maybe can get a chance to hear about this and come in and talk to us. Okay, that's what we want. So please, it's not about the views. I'm not getting monetized. I age restricted this because I'm not going to clean up the language. There are some things that I'm going to say that I really don't know how to say them and express the point that I actually want to express, without using some maybe off-color language that we don't typically allow. So we age restricted this, and this is the warning too. Again, we're not going to pull punches, and we're not going to not allow any kind of any specific word. But again, just be thoughtful of how you say things. If you're gonna use off-color language, that's fine. But at the same time, if what you're saying is just so that you can drop an F-bomb, then it probably doesn't have any part. But we're not going to ban it in the chat. We're not going to ban it from the panel. We're just going to, again, we're going to be real here. All of us be real. So, that being said, I have a disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed are those of the individuals expressing them and do not necessarily express the opinion of other panelists, this channel, or any sponsors or any of our employers. So, that being said, we can all speak freely, and we know that each one of us, and myself included, my opinions are mine and nobody else's. So when I speak, I only speak for me, and all of our panelists are the same way. They only speak for themselves. All right. Woo! That was a whole lot of talking before I bring other people in. I'm about dried out. The first thing I want to do, and partly because we know that the phone may overheat and Squib may get kicked out earlier than some of the rest of us, but when you and I were talking earlier today and this week, Squib, you had a couple things that really I thought were good, and go ahead and pick whichever one you want, and let's just kind of kick things off a little bit. And we'll just kind of open this up for some discussion and see where this goes.
Well, I've been trying to work on a speaking squibbish on racism since last week, since we were talking off air last week and stuff. Not trying to beat you to the punch, but maybe
that's fine.
Maybe warm up the audience or just put in my 2 cents. Did a lot of takes, but that's normal when I'm doing a speaking squibbish and trying to get it within a certain time limit and trying to get my point across. And what I ended up doing was going off on different tangents, which is another thing that happens when I record them. And I finally got one that I was somewhat happy with. And more or less, I talked about the fact that the way people interpret racism today and the way they deal with it is with more racism. So the people claiming to be victims of racism are actually combating it with more racism, and that's worse than the initial racism to begin with. I also think that America has worked really hard to deal with racism, to deal with inequality, to deal with intolerance. You could throw sexism and all the other isms in there with racism, right? And I think that the entertainment industry, I think that media, both mainstream and social, and I think our politicians keep dredging it up. They keep bringing it back and shoving it in our face and telling us it's still here, or it won't go away, or won't die. But yet I think we as Americans, just on our own, have done plenty to deal with it. And I think that if you're going to go out there and scream racism and play victim, then you're not going to get as much sympathy from some people, because there are other people that say that they've been affected by racism, but they still made themselves. They still took advantage of the fact that this is America, the land of opportunity, and did something with their lives and got on with it and didn't let anybody hold them down. And you've also got people that are using racism as an excuse for violence. Oh, well, I feel slighted, so I think I'm gonna, beat up this person. And you've got CEOs of company releasing emails and whatnot saying, we don't support this and we don't, why would they? But some of the places that I've been getting emails from, it's like, why would you even have anything to do with, this isn't even something you should be doing. This has nothing to do with your company, but they're terrified that somebody's going to burn down their business. So they're just placating people. And there's constantly this pushback to the Civil War and the Confederacy and slavery and white guilt and white privilege and all that. Every time I hear that stuff, it infuriates the hell out of me. And I was raised down south. You would think I'd be some sort of racist. But my parents didn't raise me to be a racist. I mean, some people say that where they live is fairly one color, and okay, fine, so be it. I've lived in all kinds of places, all kinds of diversity. Then when I was in the military, there was all kinds of diversity, and I went all around the world. I've been to Africa. What's funny is you hear all these people that have never been to Africa talking about their African descent and making that part of the issue too. And it's like, dude, you wouldn't last 5 minutes in Africa. Don't even tell me about your conditions here or anything else like that. And stuff, so things like that infuriate the hell out of me. And I look at how many people I've known of all different kinds of ethnicities, not just black, all different kinds of ethnicities that have succeeded in life. They've left whatever was holding them back behind and just succeeded in life. I mean, look at how many famous people there are of a minority. I can't stand that word either. That infuriates me, because it's like I see plenty of people of different ethnicities all over. So where are these minorities? But these air quotes minorities, you see tons of them in politics. Tons of them own their own business. Tons of them are millionaires. Tons of them are famous entertainers. The whole land of opportunity in America is a real thing, and we don't need people who are trying to push an agenda to tell us it isn't. We don't need people trying to tell people the fact that you choose to live in a bad neighborhood and you choose to be poor is somebody else's fault. It's not your fault. It is your fault. You can get out of that neighborhood. You can make a better life for yourself. Just, oh no, somebody's holding me back. No, that infuriates me too. I don't want there to be this divide in our country. I also don't think that we should all be united either. We're all individuals. And sometimes we get together in different groups, and sometimes those groups are judged. But I just, everybody in America has equal opportunity. We're not all equal. Somebody who's stronger than you, where's the equality? Somebody who's smarter than you, where's the equality? Somebody who's born rich versus somebody who's born poor. Somebody who's born poor has got to work harder to get somewhere in life. Where's the equality? But we all have equal opportunity. And that's the most important thing for me, that we don't lose. And what I'm seeing is one side gets to control the narrative. One side gets to control the media. One side gets to tell us what statues can be out there, what monuments can be out there, what we can say at work, what we can say in public, what we can say anywhere. And before you know it, they're going to be burning books. They're going to be banning movies, burning books, and it's going to be a mess. So I'm hoping that our country gets back on track somehow. And as we have in the past, when there's been tensions, we heal as a country. When we come together, we're really great, but we don't stay together very long. Well, I don't think it's a good idea for us to stay together very long, but we also don't have to be this far apart. I think there's a lot of people out there stirring the pot, and they have, it's always said that if the government can divide us, they can control us. And the media is all about sell. If it bleeds, it leads, right? They're selling this. And the entertainment industry, what's funny is, I'm going to say this on air. I'm going to go ahead and say this on air. I wasn't raised to use the N-word, but you know when I have? When I've sang rap songs, sung by black rappers who were making millions off those songs. When I was a teenager in high school, I listened to a lot of rap music with a lot of swear words. And I'd be singing along with these guys are making tons of money off of white kids that are buying their records, buying their tapes. I'm that old, tapes and records, okay? Okay. But they're the same ones who now will get on national TV and talk about how bad it is, all this stuff. But it's like, wait a minute. You were out there using these racial slurs. You were talking about living this gangster lifestyle. You were talking about, abusing women and breaking the law and killing the cops and all that. What? So it drives me nuts when I see all this. It's okay for me, but not for thee. This side can be the only side that's right, and the other side is evil. And this isn't America. And I've heard some people talk about, there could be another civil war. We hear talk about that all the time. I don't know if that's really going to happen. I hope not. But I hope that if people can have an open discussion, maybe we can stop it before something does get worse. I mean, we don't know what's next. And there's one more thing. I'd like to quote a comedian. He's a white comedian, and he had a black friend. And his black friend said to him, "You don't know what it's like to be black." And he fired right back at his black friend. "You don't know what it's like to not know what it's like to be black." And I think that kind of sums up part of what you were saying about being able to have a talk with a person of a different gender, of a different ethnicity, of a different background, of a different sexual preference, of a different religion, of a different political party, of a different point of view, and just have a conversation to understand why they are the way they are, why they think what they think. You're not trying to start a fight. You're not trying to start an argument. You're not trying to convert them. You don't want them to convert you. You just want to have a conversation. And I think America needs more of that. But all we're getting is a one-sided conversation, aren't we?
No, and I think that's just it. And there's a whole lot to unpack there, and I should have taken notes. But yeah, it's funny because
I was really worried the phone was going to overheat and shut off. So I tried to get it all in one. Okay.
No, I gotcha. It seems like at face value, this is a little too hot in my headphones. Okay. It seems like at face value that, that's just a quick, snappy, kind of a catchy comeback, right? Like, you don't know what it's like to be black. You don't know what it's like to not know what it's like to be black. But if you think about that, that's exactly kind of what I was saying, is that I don't know what it's like to be black. And I admit that I don't have a problem talking about how I don't know what it's like to be black. Okay. I don't know what it's like to be female. I don't know what it's like to be from a different country. I don't know what it's like to be raised where I'm a minority and I don't look like the majority of the people around, or talk like them, or sound like them. I don't know what it's like to be a lot of different things. I only know what it's like to be me specifically. And second of all, we all look at the world through the lens of our experience, right? I mean, if you well, there's going to be a few generalizations, but I mean, if you have a bad experience with, as a man, if you have enough bad relationships, say with women, then eventually you're going to kind of get to that point in your life where you just kind of feel like all of the women out there are bad and there aren't any decent ones and they're not to be trusted. Now you can fill in those two blanks, men and women, with any other, situation that fits. But I think that if you most of you can see what I'm saying there, or hear what I'm saying there, is that, we all judge the world and everyone and everything in it based on our past experiences. And that's not always a bad thing, but it's true for all of us. And so, the biggest point with all that is, again, if I want to know how it feels to be somebody else, then how would I ever know if they won't tell me? I had a situation here a few weeks ago, back when the racism thing was ramping up really big right after George Floyd was murdered. Let me just say that I believe it was murder, and I don't know anybody. I've never spoken with anybody who doesn't think that was a murder. Okay. Nobody's arguing that point. George Floyd was murdered, and I think that everybody would agree with that. At least, like I said, everybody I've ever spoken with does agree with that. But right after that, it was getting, it was pretty ugly there for a while on social media, and it's kind of simmered down a little bit now. But I just commented on a friend's post about such things and how, the cops were all bad and how the whole world's racist and all that. And that's fine. If that's your opinion, you get to voice that. That's, you have that right in this country. But I don't even remember the exact words of my comment, but I said, at what point can we just sit down, and at what point can somebody like me ask questions and find out answers and find out, actually have a discussion about some of this, so that we do get to know more about what it feels like to be you. And it wasn't even the friend of mine who made the post. It was somebody else that I don't even know, decided just to go off on me and assume that I'm a racist because I already don't know what it's like to be them. And I'm already, I'm not out there protesting and picketing and everything else, saying that, the white people need to bow down to everybody else and this, that, and the other. And I should just pull my head out of my white ass. And I don't even remember the rest of it. I said, all right, well, we could have had a conversation, and we could have actually had something beautiful come of this, and we could have actually tried to understand each other. But you wanted to just prove a point and call me names, and you've shut down communication because now I don't want to talk. I hope it was worth it, which, stirred up more not good feelings and not good words, and I just let it go. But the thing that I want to accomplish tonight isn't to stir this up. And it may be what happens, but it's not the intent. Earlier, somebody had commented that, I think it was Travis T had commented, we deal with it by not making it a big deal. Well, I think I alluded to this last week, but anybody who's ever been through a traumatic experience, whether it was somebody who was molested as a child or somebody that was attacked as an adult, maybe you were in a terrible car accident, whatever the case, if you've been through some sort of, and maybe you're a veteran and you saw some stuff that you can't even explain to those of us who've never been there, whatever is the case, if it messed you up, what do all the experts, all the therapists tell you is the safe and healthy way to deal with that? Not talk about it, just let it go, cover it up, bury it, and not get it out. Is that healthy? No. We do have an issue. There are people in this country who are a problem. And if we don't talk about this, then I think that it's kind of like Edmund Burke saying the only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. That's a paraphrase. And so I want to have the conversation. I want to admit, all of us, sit down and talk about the fact that, hey, there are some assholes out there. There are people that are racists in America. It happens. Okay. And I don't care if we're talking about the police, if we're talking about business, if we're talking about education. You pick an industry, there's race holes. There's race holes. There's racists. There are assholes in those groups of people. Any group of people, there's going to be some bad ones. We all know that. The point being that not everybody, number one, is bad. Okay. But number two, there are ways that we need to deal with this. And there are things that we actually don't deal with, don't get to deal with, not in this country. I know that right now there's a big push for, especially and I'm just going to lump everybody together. And I know this is bad and it's dangerous, but I don't know how else to do this part. But the Black Lives Matter protesters and all of their sympathizers, I should say, there's a big push right now to eliminate history, right? Tear down these statues. Let's make it look like it never happened. Well, again, based on what I just said, I don't find that healthy. I don't think that covering up the bad things that happened in this country in the past actually is good and healthy for our country. But at the same time, what actually we need to remember is you're never going to eliminate racism in a country where people have the right to be racists. And I don't like them. And I am not advocating to be racist. And to me, we should have started with this. Let me just establish my own opinion. This is how I define a racist. It's somebody who believes that based on race alone, they are better than everybody that's not in their race. So a white supremacist, by definition, in my mind, is a racist because they believe that white people are supreme over every other race. Now, I don't think that. And you can tell me I'm racist, and you can tell me that I say and do racist things, and they may or may not be true. That's really, really subjective. But I do not believe that my skin color makes me better than anybody, or my ethnicity, or my gender, or my sexual orientation, or my religion, or anything else makes me better than anybody. And I think that's what racism is. But if I did, I'd have that right. In this country, I've got the right to be an asshole. I've got the right to say things that make you offended, and nobody can do anything about it. And we've kind of lost sight of that. And we've kind of turned racism into, or racist into, the new word that says, well, you said something that I don't like, so I'm just going to call you a racist, because it's one of the worst things that you could possibly call somebody. It's losing its edge now, but it's still one of the worst things that you could possibly call somebody based on some of the atrocities that have happened in our country and others based on race and ethnicity. And if you don't,
people get offended way too easy. And what you don't find offensive, what 100 other people don't find offensive, one person does. And if they're a loud enough voice, then suddenly you're the racist, you're the bigot, you're the whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And okay, somebody needs to establish in this country that you have the right to offend somebody, or somebody has a right to feel offended, but that's all they are feelings. The same way you have the right to feel like a bigot, you have the right to feel afraid, you have the right to feel offended, you have the right to, and if you're offended, so be it. It's on you. It's on you. Your feelings are on you. They're not on me. I get so sick of people twisting it and going, you made me feel this way. No, you made yourself feel that way. You reacted to me. You reacted to me exercising my freedom.
Here's the thing is let me tweak, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, Squib. This is my own take on what you just said, but I would tweak that a little bit and say that maybe you made me feel that way, but I chose how to react to it and how to respond to it and whether or not I dwell on it. So yeah, there's always going to be somebody that comes along and says things that you don't like and that are offensive. And again, in the United States of America, whoop-de-doo, you got offended. Okay. Guess what? Not only do we have the right to be offensive, we also have the right to not give a shit. And that's another thing that I've seen recently is white silence equals violence. If I'm not out there protesting that Black Lives Matter, then I'm part of the problem. Or maybe is it just because I don't have anything good to say, so I'm choosing to not say anything at all? I have the right to not put a dog into this fight. And it doesn't mean that I don't think that Black Lives Matter, because they do. But I can't say that all lives matter right now, because that makes me racist, even though they do. And the only thing that makes sense in my mind that it isn't racist is if we just say lives matter and we leave it at that. But people want to make a bigger deal out of the Black lives right now, because that's what the riots and the protests have been about, is how a black man got killed by a white cop. But I have not seen any evidence yet that suggests that the guy got killed because he was black and the cop was white. He got killed because the cop was an asshole and a murderer. Simple as that. But people don't want to hear that. They want to hear that cops are bad and they're killing black people, at a higher rate than white people. The numbers don't support that, but I don't even know what to believe anymore, because I don't trust any news outlets anymore. So I don't know what to believe. And that does not help. And that makes me mad, because I can't even sit down and have an educated conversation with somebody, because I can't get educated, because no matter what I see, it's skewed some way, and I cannot get all the truth anywhere. And that's not the way that news needs to work. Anyway, out there, Ghost said racism is having negative ideals about a person because of race, not necessarily they're better, but judge people based on race. Now, I want to expound on that just a little bit, and I want to say this: that I think in some way, shape, or form, I think that all of us, I'll admit to it. And I think that if we're all honest, I think every one of you could probably admit to this too, whether I'm talking to the panelists, those of you listening, anybody that's hearing this right now. I think that whether or not it's race or something, we're all a little bit prejudiced in some way, shape, or form. And when I say that, I mean, you know, if you go into a certain part of town that's maybe a little bit not as well off, maybe not the well-to-do part of town, you know, what do? You make sure your doors are locked, right? When you even before you park, you make sure when you're rolling down the street, maybe your doors are locked. Is that a racist thing to do? Or is that an elitist thing to do, or a privileged thing to do? Or is it just good tactics? But the fact of the matter is that certain neighborhoods are more likely to have crimes committed than other neighborhoods, right? And so there's a disconnect in the world, and has been for some time and probably always, that, you know, just because things are statistically so, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a racist edge or a racist angle to it. And like I said, I live in one of the most diverse blocks that I can think of. We've got 2, 4, 5 houses on this block, and 6 houses on this block. And so we've got white neighbors. I've got a single divorced lady next door. I've got a Hispanic dude next door. I've got I think it's a rental house because the cars in the faces change every year and a half. Kitty cornered. I've got a black family across the street, and rednecks kitty cornered the other direction. And heck, you never know when they're going to have a bonfire at midnight and tents set up outside. And these guys all have, you know, jacked up pickup trucks, and one of them's rusted out and loud pipes. And I've got a diverse neighborhood. I've got anywhere from the trailer park to you know, a super nice looking house, and the lady spends more time on her lawn than she does inside. I've got it all on my block. And the cool thing is that none of us, as far as I can tell, none of us dislike any of the rest of us. There's people I don't really interact with much. My neighbors across the street, I talk to more than anybody, but none of us care about, you know, the ethnicity or the income level, or, you know, whatever it is of the people on the block. I mean, we all smile and wave at each other when we drive by, and I might not know all their names, but, you know, as far as I can tell, everybody that lives around me is a pretty decent person. And so I think that if we all sat down and had this discussion together, I think that we all might find out that most everybody kind of feels that way, no matter the ethnicity. But right now, it's way too easy to get into an argument. And which one of you said it? I don't remember, but one of you said people are looking for a reason to get offended right now, and you're right.
Okay,
and
let me take something that you said, extrapolate on it, and pass it around to the panel. Okay, so you're talking about the whole locking your car thing. And this is something where I had a recent conversation with a black lady about this. Okay, she's a landscaper, and she was at somebody's house, and it was an old white lady, and she's standing in the front yard with a weed whip, and the old white lady clicks the lock button on her car from inside the house, hits the remote key fob. Now, she says that was racist because I'm black and I'm doing yard work in her yard, and she thinks I'm gonna rob her car. Now, I didn't go fire back at her because we were having a good conversation. I just want to leave it be. I mean, we were at the store, and, you know, whatever. But here's the thing: for her to assume that the woman hit her lock button because she thought a black person was going to rob her car is just as racist as locking your car because a black person's in your lawn. Now, let me explain. What if it was a white landscaper, but it's a stranger to her? She doesn't know this person. She doesn't know who they are. She doesn't, or she's a little old lady, she's living all on her own, and everything she does is kind of a little cautious. Or what if she's living in maybe a not such a good neighborhood, like what you were talking about, and maybe it's a prevalent thing to lock your car and make sure your car is locked. To just assume that because she's a little old white lady, she's instantly racist. Now maybe she is because she was raised that way. She's older, and who knows? But the whole point being is, who's the racist? The woman in the house with the key fob, or the woman standing outside looking for an excuse to call it racism? So what do you guys see there?
It could be neither one. It could be both, but I don't think that the two are related. And I think to the point you're trying to make there is that just because somebody locked their car, it doesn't necessarily make them racist just because the person doing the landscaping happened to be black. I would do the same thing if I had somebody working at my house that I don't know. And if I don't know you, chances are very, very, very slim that I'm going to trust you. That's just how I am. I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care any of the rest of it. I don't trust people I don't know. And so I would do the same thing, and it doesn't matter who's doing the landscaping to me. Now, you're right. The old lady could have been racist. We don't know. But just the very fact that she locked her car door, again, that's somebody that's looking to get offended.
Right. And that's just it. If you're looking for racism, you'll find it. Whether it's there or not, you'll find it. And that's the problem. People are looking for it where it doesn't exist. They're creating it where it doesn't exist. They're bringing it back after it's been dealt with. They're artificially inserting it. But this was a matter of perception. If you're on one side and you feel oppressed, then you're going to see it everywhere. If you're on the other side,
you're going to call it out whether it's there or not.
So I want to know, would other people look at that? Are they both wrong? Is one of them right? Is one of them wrong?
Let's maybe flip things just a little bit here. I'm getting some feedback somewhere.
Is that Squib?
Yeah,
I muted you, Squib. We'll try this.
I mean, just think about it, though. If you grew up in an environment where you were always treated as a second-class citizen, you've always had that kind of a reaction from people that were a different skin color than you. You always had people making a second look at you. If you had a lifetime of that you had to deal with, I mean, I could see that there would be frustration. I know I wouldn't want to deal with situations like that. Mm-hmm. And I've had people lock their doors when I walk by. I mean, that's just a common reaction. But I just think that if you've been raised in an environment where you've just never been treated as an equal, I can see why people would be frustrated, because I know I wouldn't want to deal with that.
Well,
go ahead.
I think it's super important to admit there is privilege. I'm a white guy. I carry a gun. When I got pulled over the other day by a cop, I definitely get treated differently than if a black guy had gotten pulled over and said he had a gun.
That's bullshit.
No, it's not. There's no way. You're saying
white privilege doesn't exist. That is bullshit. I'm so sick of hearing that. I'm waiting to get mine.
I'm with Duke. I'm not saying it's white privilege, okay. Duke, I'm with you. Everybody who's ever interacted with somebody who is not white understands that this does happen. Now, is it all real, or is a lot of it perceived where it isn't there? I don't know. But you and I both know that there are people that get pulled over and get hassled just because of driving while black or walking while black. Does it happen all the time? No. Is it sometimes other things that they got pulled over for, but they want to say that it was this? Maybe. But I don't know, because it doesn't happen to me. But I'm not going to sit here and say that it doesn't happen to anybody, because you and I both know that there's dick cops out there that pull people over just to fuck with them. And it could be what their color of their skin is. It could be because the cop had a bad day and he's being more of a dick than normal, or she. But you and I both know that it happens. And we're not going to sit here and say that it doesn't happen ever. Is it a systemic problem, and do all cops do it? No, I won't say that either. I still support cops. Not the dicks, the good ones. But it does happen. And I know people that have had this happen, and the interaction turned out fine, but still the thought is in the dude's mind when he gets pulled over, okay, what's going to happen? Kids, put your hands up on the headrest in front of you. I'm going to put my hands on the steering wheel. Some people have gotten conditioned to doing things just to get through an interaction with police because they don't know what's going to happen. So, Squib, I'm not necessarily trying to call you out, but I do disagree with what you said. But Duke, I'm going to let you finish your thought.
Yeah, man, I think we've got to admit that now there's a reason for that. There's a reason why I would say that a black man would be treated different than a white man if he has a gun, he's getting pulled over. I understand that there are some statistics that show crime, and I'm okay with that. But we've got to have the conversation that just to be honest, that I'm going to be treated differently because I'm white. I've got to have that conversation. We need to look to be allies in this situation, especially the Second Amendment community on this whole issue. That's another thing, but I think it's it's really important to look at the whole context of the problem.
No, I agree, and yeah, there are sometimes reasons that happens. But those of you on the panel, what do you all have to say about that?
We talking about the idea of white privilege, or what exactly are we saying here?
I do not believe.
I mean, I'm just going to say
I don't think there's white privilege. I think that white privilege is a myth. And I think that I can honestly say that without being hypocritical when I say that some people do get fucked with because they're black, or because they're Hispanic, or because they don't look like everybody else in the neighborhood, or because they stick out in their neighborhood. I know that people sometimes get fucked with because of that. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's white privilege. It just means that sometimes even law enforcement, they get prejudiced, they get jaded, they get tired of, looking at the statistics, and they start to see things. They look for patterns that aren't necessarily there because they've seen these patterns enough. Does it excuse it? No, but it hopefully can help explain it. So not the white privilege so much, Travis, as just the notion that, do you believe that some people do get fucked with just because of the color of their skin or their ethnicity?
I'm just going to say this. I want to go back and look at one thing that Travis T said earlier. He said, why not just treat everyone the same and call out people who don't on a case-by-case basis? I mean, I know lots of people, members of my own family, that make racist comments, that just narrow-minded opinions and a mindset. And I see this, unfortunately, in a lot of people that I know in Nebraska, right? And myself, moving from a town that was a majority Hispanic, I would deal with comments from people almost on a constant basis, or members of my own family, or people I'd run into. And I just think with people that have those kinds of opinions about people of color, the stuff that they say, I mean, even growing up in my own home and stuff, hearing this, you get conditioned to a certain mindset that unfortunately is very negative. And I think that you can call it ignorance, you can call it what you want, but if you have lots of people or generations of people that don't treat others like equals, you have, and you're raised in a home where the mindset is that this person of this skin color is not an equal to you, or there's some stereotype about them that's perpetuated by your own family, it's going to have an effect in some way, shape, or form out there in society, whether I'm a cop or whether I'm a professional or whatever. I mean, it's hard to get away from that kind of conditioning that a person might receive when they're younger. I guess I don't know if I'm making any sense with this. I'm just saying a lot of the narrow-mindedness that I run into with other Nebraskans, I can see that carrying over into
generational
society. It is, and that is going to have an effect on people because whether it's that person locking their doors when somebody walks by because, well, mom and dad said that those people of that skin color do this or do that, or they're thieves, or they're all bad, or they're all whatever. I mean, that, and I am a very open-minded person. I try to treat everybody the same as much as I possibly can, but there are things that I heard growing up, just even things I hear from my own family now, that I'm like, if I said something like that, I would be fired immediately from my job, the comments that people make. And that is very difficult to get around. I just think about jokes and stuff that people would. I mean, there's one thing when you're joking. We've all heard, well, there's a Pollock and a priest and a whatever goes into a bar kind of joke, right? But to hear some of the things that family members have said, I mean, I can understand why people grow up narrow-minded, racist. Okay, I'm just going to say that right now. I can understand the frustration from other people because I wouldn't want to be called these things or treated this way because I'm not white. All right, I would never want to have to deal with that.
And you have maybe a unique perspective, Travis, with what you've done and where you've lived and worked, for so many years now. For those of you that aren't aware, the community and the school system that Travis just left is predominantly Hispanic now, right, Travis?
Yeah, it has been for probably about the last, I'd say probably 20 years
in central Nebraska. And Travis is a Spanish teacher. And I'm not talking about he teaches white kids, uno, dos. No, Travis has been like when you and I go to English class and then the people whose Spanish is their first language go to Spanish class. That's what Travis teaches or was teaching in that community. And you get to see, or I shouldn't say get to see, but you have been able to observe better than a lot of people who are white, because you're not Hispanic, you're Czech, right? I mean, you're European.
Czech, German, and Swedish. I'm about as non. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The opposite of right. So, but you have been exposed to a perspective that a lot of us maybe wouldn't have. Plus, the nuances of the language and everything else. So even when people are having conversations, you're right there still with them. And so, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm glad you're here, because maybe it doesn't necessarily, we're talking not so much about Black Lives Matter at the moment, but, we've got a lot of Hispanic communities across my state and across, all of the Midwest and the Plain states. And, this is something that the Hispanic community deals with all the time too. Now, when we've got people like MS-13 coming across the border and causing problems and making a bad name for everybody, it's kind of easy to see, again, where some of this that the police are dealing with, if most of the people that you're busting are, gang-related activity, and they may be black gangs or Hispanic gangs or Asian gangs or whatever, I mean, when you run across somebody who's walking down the street dressed just like everybody else, wearing, the same clothes that the thugs wear, and maybe not a thug. Maybe this is just a kid that his mom gave him $20 and sent him down the street to go get some butter and eggs and milk.
Rapper in the video you watched on MTV,
when you're dressed like everybody is, I'm not saying that if you dress like a thug, you're in a gang. What I'm saying is, when everybody dresses the same and everybody that's walking down the street, the police can't tell who's a thug and who's a gangster and who's not, then what do we expect from them? Stop and frisk? No, that's a huge violation of a lot of rights. But at the same time, when they've dealt with so many people that look and act the same way, then when you look and act like the people that they've been dealing with, why would you not expect they're going to assume a few things about you until they get to know you better?
But see,
right?
Sandhills, your statement right there just invalidated what Duke just said. So which is it?
What do you mean?
Okay. He's got white privilege when he gets pulled over because they're not going to mess with him because his skin color is white. But if he was black, he'd instantly be facing. Okay, a black
No, that's not what I said. That's not at all what I said.
You called it white privilege. That's what you called it.
I said I have to admit that I'm going to be treated differently.
You said
Than
privilege.
a black man. Okay, I'll say privilege. I have the privilege to be not treated the same way a black man is going to be treated if he's carrying a gun.
That's not the same as white privilege, though.
Do you think it's not because of your skin color, but because of what kind of vehicle you're driving, how you're behaving, how you're dressed, how you're groomed, how you act when the cops come up there, what neighborhood you're in? Not saying that, okay, like what Sandhills was saying, you've got a neighborhood where almost every single time the cop pulls somebody over, it's a stolen car, it's a DUI, they've got drugs, they got a warrant, they're belligerent with the cops, there's a chase, there's an arrest, so in that neighborhood, it doesn't matter if you're black or white. Now, sure, most of the people in the neighborhood maybe are black. or they're white, or they're Hispanic, or they're whatever, right? But that's when that cop almost 9 out of 10 times they pull somebody over, that's what's going to happen. Then 10 out of 10 times they're going to be on their guard when they come up to that car. But if you live in the neighborhood where when they pull you over, they're just looking to make money for the municipality because all they are overpaid meter maid. Okay, you're going to get treated different because of that, not because you're white. If you're a black guy wearing a suit and a tie driving a Mercedes and you're doing 15 over, you're not going to get treated the same as a carload full of guys that look like they're Bloods and Crips driving a ghetto sled. You're not. And if you say you are, I don't agree, unless, of course, the cop is racist at that point. I think it's all about perception. It's your appearance and it's where you're at. It's just like if you were to drive through Detroit to go to downtown, say you wanted to drive through the neighborhoods, because you can actually save time driving through the neighborhoods if you want to get downtown to go to one of the sporting events or concerts or something like that, and you break down there, you're going to look like a marshmallow in hot chocolate. And you've got to be worried about what is going to happen because of the color of your skin. Now, that's racism. And don't tell me your white privilege is going to get you out of that trouble. And that's a terrible thing to say, but it's true. That's why everybody takes the expressway, even though it takes longer and you're backed up in traffic. But that's the reality of things. Just like that cop who has to deal with the environment that they patrol in every night. They're not going to treat you a certain way if you don't act a certain way, if you don't fit a certain stereotype. And you might say, well, that's profiling. Well, I don't like profiling either, but sometimes it's a necessary evil, because if they had profiled, we might not have had 9/11.
I think we all profile to an extent, though. I think we all do. I think it's human nature to profile. You look at somebody and you size them up and you make snap decisions about them all the time. That's what we do as gun owners, right? As people who are aware of our surroundings and situational awareness. I mean, you look at everybody in the room as you just do a once over, and you're instantly making snap judgments about 9/10 or more of the people in the room. You may go back and your eyes may linger again on a couple people that you think may be either troublemakers or somebody that could possibly have your back if it hits the fan. But we all instantly make snap judgments about everybody and everything. And then once we've made the initial assessment, then, that's when more data comes in, can change that assessment. Right. But I think that the snap decision, the profiling, you can call it prejudice, you can call it whatever you want to. There's a lot of different things that we could call that, but I think that's just human nature.
Well, let's say the cop pulled over somebody driving your neighbor's pickup truck, jacked up, rusty, got the hillbilly bumper stickers on there, blaring country music, loud exhaust, and the guy's driving like an a-hole. Do you think the cop is maybe going to be a little bit more on guard, or a little bit more, whatever you want to call it, with that person than a guy driving a brand new pickup truck with no bumper stickers on, not blaring the music, not with a loud exhaust, not with the? And you might go, well, then that's privilege of money. No, it's privilege of appearance, if you want to call it privilege at all. But that doesn't mean that person driving a new truck isn't a drug dealer and they got hidden drugs in there. And it doesn't mean the person driving the truck with a loud exhaust and the blaring the music, it has no traffic violations up to this point. You
possibly,
don't know.
But
you don't know.
In this day and age, I think we're going to be hard pressed to find a cop that'll approach any vehicle at this point without caution.
And that's the other thing. If you want the cops to treat people of a certain background or a certain appearance or a certain behavior a certain way, burning down police stations and saying we're going to kill the police and defund the police and all that isn't going to get them to stop doing it if they were doing it to begin with. So I just think that in a few circumstances, you are going to have some people with prejudices that are maybe above and beyond what you might be able to explain based on where they work and what they've had to go through. But for everybody else, it's just doing the job. I'll give you an example. We got pulled over once. Dad had a Camaro that the taillights constantly burned out in that thing. We'd have to keep changing taillight bulbs in the dang thing. Well, we got pulled over in my white privileged neighborhood, and with, they think there's only like 3 black families in the whole neighborhood back in the 80s with this car because of a burned out taillight. And the cops got out of the car and they put their hands on their guns. And one came over on the driver's side where he was and the passenger side where I was. I'm a teenager at the time. And they come up to the car with their hands on their guns and they kind of crouch back and they ask for license and registration, stuff like that. And I was pretty offended because I'm like, what the hell is going on? We ain't, you run the license plate. My dad has no criminal record. We're no warrants, no whatever. We weren't, it's burned out taillights again. And I talked to, about a year or two ago, I talked to a retired cop or a former cop about this. And he says, you know why they pulled you over? I said, yeah, burned out taillights. He goes, he said, no. I mean, do you know why they had their hands on their guns? I'm like, yeah, because they were assholes. He goes, no, because they thought you were smuggling drugs in the taillight. I go, what? He goes, oh yeah, drug dealers, they put them in the taillights all the time. And a burned out taillight is a key sign that somebody's smuggling drugs. I go, I never knew that. And he goes, most people don't know that. But for decades, that's one of the reasons I haven't liked cops. Where was my privilege there? Where was my, so it was strictly a matter of, they thought my dad was a drug dealer. I mean, you it's all perception. And if you want to take that
Wait, you're telling me that you believe that cops pull people over for broken taillights because there's possibly drugs inside the taillight?
That's what I had a former cop tell me.
Okay.
That's what he told me. He said the reason they had their hands on their guns is because they thought you were smuggling drugs.
Or they couldn't take a chance that, they couldn't chance it until they knew for sure.
But here I was in my upper middle class, almost all white, privileged neighborhood, in the 80s, and it happened. So it's all perception, and I can have a negative attitude about police for the rest of my life because of that. But I can also say, where was all this, protection, or where was the profiling? Where we didn't fit the profile, we weren't. Well, we were. So it happens. I don't like the fact that people are looking for a problem where it doesn't exist or where it rarely exists.
But that goes back to human nature. And Agorizer has thrown a comment out there saying discrimination is natural and smart. If you don't practice it, you're a shithead. Now, earlier, Agorizer, you had said that we all discriminate. That doesn't necessarily imply prejudice. And I just want to say that the way that I see those two words, I think we reverse them. I think we're all, to an extent, I think we're all prejudiced. I think that we all build prejudices. Is it prejudices? Anyway, we all build that up in our mind, again, based on our experiences. And if you grow up in, you have a bad experience, say, with dogs as a small child, you get bit by a dog. Okay. Then you're not around dogs very often, but every time you see a dog, you instantly get frightened, right? Because you think that you're going to have another bad experience that based on the limited experience that you have with dogs, which was bad. Okay. Does that mean that the dog's going to bite you? Probably not. But is that fear legitimate? Yes. That fear is legitimate to you. Whether or not the fear is rational or irrational, it's real to you. And when people get pulled over, whether or not the fear that they're going to get messed with, or they're going to get arrested, or they're going to get shot for doing nothing wrong, there is a real fear. Now, is it rational or irrational? I don't know. Depends on the situation. Maybe it's a real fear. Tell Diamond Reynolds that people don't get shot when they're not doing anything wrong. I think she would disagree. For those of you that don't know her name, you might remember Philando Castile's name. She was in the car with him, so was her daughter. And sometimes bad things do happen. Now, is it all the time? No. And again, was he shot because he was black? I don't know. I don't know all the details, and I don't know what's in the heart of the guy that pulled the trigger. Okay. But I do know that sometimes bad things happen. And I do know that when we see those headlines, and again, we can have a whole nother discussion just on what the media does to stir things up and make things worse, and how irresponsible they are in their reporting. But when something like that happens and it does make national headlines, then that only feeds the flames, right? For the people that have that fear that they're going to get messed with because they're black, or because they're Hispanic, or because they're, fill in the blank, whatever they are, because it happened once and it could happen again. And we all know that people make mistakes and sometimes people are jerks. So we're not going to say that it never happens. And I'm not going to judge whether or not that fear is rational or irrational. That's between you and whatever you're feeling. But there are people that have that fear, but let's not lose track of the fact that whether or not that fear is based in likelihood, or if it's an irrational fear, it's kind of like, I'm afraid to go out of my house because there might be an asteroid that falls on me. Well, there might be, but it's a pretty slim chance. You might get shot by a cop, but it's a pretty slim chance if you don't reach for things that you're not told to reach for and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's a real fear or not. Okay. But if you think that that's what you're, or if that is what you're afraid of, then for you, that's real. And for people that have that is their perception. And each one of us, our perception defines our reality, right? So what I don't want to have is a discussion where we tell people, well, you're just being dumb. You're just being stupid. Don't even worry about that. I don't want to invalidate what people think or feel. Okay. Whether or not I think they're right, I don't get to choose whether or not they think or feel something. Okay. That's theirs. And I don't get to own that. It's not my problem. But at the same time, I don't get to tell them whether or not it's something that they really should think or feel. That's their own decision to make. Okay. But having said all that, there are, I think there's a difference between prejudice and discrimination. Now, let's go back to earlier what I had said, and I'm pulling this all back to Agrizer's comment there about discrimination and prejudice. I may be a racist. I may be a complete evil bigot. I might be the biggest asshole in all of America. Okay. And I might think that everybody that, has different color skin, even people with dark tans, I might not like them, or whatever. Maybe I don't like, this, that, or the other. Maybe I don't like people with man buns because I find it foolish, but that's my own opinion. But the thing is, it doesn't matter if I don't like something. It doesn't matter if I hate something. Okay. I don't think I hate anybody, but it doesn't matter. What matters is how I treat them. So if I tell somebody, that I want to hurt them, or I try to hurt somebody based solely on the color of their skin or their religion or their sexual preference or whatever it is, then that's a crime. Okay. But hating somebody is not a crime. Thinking that I'm better than somebody is not a crime. Saying bad things that offend people is not a crime, unless I'm actually trying to incite violence or stir up a panic or things like that. That's an irresponsible use of my words. It's not protected by the First Amendment, but expressing my opinion is. And so I have the right to be a jerk, but I don't have the right to tell somebody, I'm not going to hire you because you're black. I don't have the right to say, I'm not going to work with you because you're Mexican. I don't have the right to say that, I'm not going to, well, there's a lot of things that I actually do have the right to. I have the right to not let you in my panel based on whether or not I like you, because it's my panel. But we know the things that are protected by the laws, right? And discrimination to me is when you actually move from your racism being internal to externalizing it. And actually treating somebody differently based on your prejudices, whether it's racism, sexism, homophobia, any ism or phobia that we could throw in there, doesn't matter. The point being that I think, to me, discrimination is the part where that's where we start violating other people's rights. And I don't think that racism or any of those other isms or prejudice violate anybody's rights. I think that I've got the right to be a jerk if I want to be a jerk, and I've got the right to tell you off, and you've got the right to be offended, and you've got the right to tell me back off and whatever. But if I start targeting you and attacking you and actually doing things to try and hurt you, okay, now I've committed a crime, and it doesn't really matter why. I've committed a crime. I don't think that that killing somebody is they're not any more dead because somebody doesn't like a black person versus just because they got killed. They're still dead. Okay. And the person that killed them is still a murderer. And I don't like seeing things like hate crimes or hate speech being talked about in legal terms and having laws about those. But I do say that there's a difference between the prejudice and the discrimination. And I would just say that I would reverse them from what Agarizer has said. And prejudice is right up there with racism, and we have a right to be prejudiced. We don't have a right to discriminate against anybody. That violates their rights. But me not liking you does not violate your rights. That being said, I like all of you, just so you know.
We love you too, man.
Yeah, thanks.
Can we talk about the statues being pulled down for just a little bit? Can we maybe, since that's happening
Yes.
a lot across the country?
Yes.
We keep saying, well, that's erasing history. I don't know if that's necessarily taking it out of the history books or if that's deleting that passage from Wikipedia. And I can see how some people would say, well, you start pulling down statues and then you start erasing sections from history books and this and that. Now, I'm not from the South, okay? I never had family that fought in the Confederacy. And I can understand that they, those people are proud of their family members for fighting for whatever cause they believed in, right? But I don't know if I necessarily disagree with the statues being pulled down. I'm sure this is going to tick a few people off me saying it.
It's okay.
I guess the fact that we have a person that, has a memorial, and you might say, well, no, they represent the soldiers that fought in that battle.
Well, wait, Travis, can you tell me when they erected those? When did they erect those statues?
Like the 60s, right?
Oh, that's right. The 60s. The
When we had-
1960s or the 1860s? Which one was it?
I guess the thing is, you've got a statue of a person that owned human beings as property in our country. I guess I don't want to see that kind of a symbol. That's just me. I'm going to be honest with you. They pulled down a statue of Christopher Columbus. I didn't even know the guy had a statue. Personally, just after looking at history and the conquest that happened, I don't think he was necessarily a good person. All right. It's the same thing with like Cortez, conquering Mexico.
You better demolish the Washington Monument then. As a matter of fact, take down the Lincoln Memorial too, because he's a war criminal.
I don't know. I'm just, I can see why people would be upset if they put up a statue of Stalin or whoever it was that was invading the Czech Republic in the 50s. When my family had to leave, if they put that statue up in my town, I wouldn't want that statue up. I can just say that right now. Because my family, my mom, my dad's side, they had to basically leave. They had to leave everything they worked for in the Czech Republic, and they had to leave in, I don't know if it was 1951, 52, because the communists were rolling into Czechoslovakia, and they had to leave all their property and come to the U.S. and start over again because of a communist invasion. I mean, I would not want a statue of a communist in my community. You might say, well, communist is one thing and the soldier is something else. The hatred those people had towards my family, or the fact that my family didn't want to adopt their ideals and they had to leave their home. I don't know. I guess I wouldn't want that statue. I can understand why people would be upset about it. And you're right, Squid. None of those guys have a perfect past, a perfect history. They were slave owners at one point or another. They had done horrible things, I'm not completely.
Whether or not they have is taking down all of the history, is taking down all of the reminders really the thing to do. If we're going to complain, and I shouldn't say we, but if people are going to complain about how racist America is and how racist our past is and how terrible the slave trade was, and it was and still is to this day in certain parts of the world, even in our country, horrendous. It's terrible. I can't think of very many things that are worse, if anything, that is worse than that, than somebody acting like they own you and you become property. I don't think there's a worse thing in the world than that. I can think of things that may be just as bad, but I can't think of a worse feeling. And when I imagine how that must feel.
One problem I have with a lot of this stuff is we're trying to erase our history. Do we have a really dark history? Yes, we absolutely have done some horrible things in our past.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that tearing down a statue is not going to erase that history. It happened. I can understand that people get upset about symbols and things like that. I get it, but if we don't understand our history and study our history, it like the old saying says, we're doomed to repeat it. So let's not destroy that history. I mean, we don't have to celebrate the bad stuff about our history, but we can celebrate how far we've come since that point.
But when were these monuments erected? They were erected from the 20s to the 60s by a bunch of racist leaders who wanted to remind the black community their place.
What?
Yeah, that's when most of them were erected.
You freaking ignorant Yankees are so damn. You believe all the crap they taught you in public school.
No,
Actually, I was never
no.
taught that in public school.
I was never taught
wasn't
that in
taught
public
that.
school. I researched it afterwards.
So
But
I
if that's
sat
the
in
hill you
public
want
school
to,
in Georgia reading a history book telling you that you and your family and the people all around you were the bad guys and the villains. You try living with that.
no, I'm saying that they were erected to remind black people. That's what all those Robert E. Lee statues and all those other statues that were erected. They were erected years and years and years after the Civil War, as a reminder during the Civil Rights Movement, as a reminder to black people.
During the Jim Crow time and during
It had nothing
segregation.
to do with the 100th anniversary of the Civil War. Nothing at all.
You're right. Had nothing to do with black people fighting for their rights at that time. If that's the hill you want to die on, I'm sorry. I just won't get with that program, man. And that's why I think we really need to step forward and look to be allies in this situation, and not on the side of, it's not erasing history. I'm not trying to upturn graves. I understand your concern, but man, these things were a symbol to black people to stay in their place. And that's exactly what they're looked at nowadays. And if I have a fellow American who's black and says, I see that as oppression, I can understand that. And I want to be sympathetic to that. And as an American, that's my issue, man.
All right, now hold on, both of you, because we're not going to have this be a knockdown drag out. I know you're both passionate, and that's fine. But to the point, I think that we were beginning to make there is that we have the choice of removing these reminders. Okay, is it going to undo what actually was done? No. Is it going to make things any better? No. Now, some people that have been through terrible things, first of all, I don't know how you forget something like that when it happened to you personally. So I don't know what difference, that having a scar as a reminder, I think that sometimes those reminders, you can choose to look at those as a terrible thing and dwell on what bad happened, or you can choose to let that reminder remind you that, hey, I'm going to make sure this never happens again. I'm going to make sure that whatever bad thing happened, I will fight against that tooth and nail and prevent that from happening in the future. My fear of removing these monuments is that it makes a whole lot of stuff really easy to sweep under the rug and say that it never happened. And we need to not forget our past lest we be doomed to repeat it. And that's the biggest fear that I've got when it comes to removing some of these monuments. Now, I don't know what it's like to look at a monument and feel what people might feel or must feel when they see that. And it reminds them of, years of oppression of their ancestors. But let's keep in mind, there ain't anybody breathing air right now that was an American slave. And there ain't anybody breathing air right now that owned one. Now, there are people that came in this country illegally as indentured servants and got human trafficked. And I'm not saying slavery doesn't exist. What I'm saying is, if we're going to talk about the slave trade that was abolished by Abraham Lincoln with the Emancipation Proclamation, then there ain't anybody alive today that remembers those times. Okay?
Okay,
And
two things about that. Indentured servitude was legal. Slavery was legal.
at the time,
I'm not
yes.
saying they were good, but they
Right.
were legal. And I think that's the first thing people forget. This is just like the whole gun thing. People are like, yeah, we got to start the boogaloo. We got to go down there to the state capitol and drag them out by their hair and execute them in the courtyard. No, that's not how you do it. You win it legally. Everything could have been handled differently. Things were changing. Times were changing. Unfortunately, it came to war. But the war wasn't about slaves. It was about money.
Yes.
And they don't teach that in the schools anymore.
Well,
And you're not gonna
the
get
slavery
people to-
was an easy scapegoat to blame the conflict on, just like racism today is an easy scapegoat to blame our conflict on. But it's the issue is never the issue, right?
And those statues of those Confederate officers, most of them were officers in the U.S. military beforehand and had served sometimes in a conflict that was in the history books beforehand, and some of them went on afterward to do things, to include get elected or whatever. And sure, some of them were slave owners, some were not, but it doesn't matter. It wasn't illegal at the time. Those who want to say, I'm going to commit this illegal act in the name of change, are worse than the people who are saying, I'm not going to change this because it's not illegal yet. And people don't want to look at that. They just want to have this hatred, and you know, so a black person looks at a statue of P.T. Beauregard and he's offended. I look at a statue of P.T. Beauregard and I see a hero, because he tried to prevent the war from starting. But most people don't know that, do they? And he protected the citizens of Charleston when the Union was bombarding the city, and he was trying to save lives. But people don't look at that. They just go, he's an angry white slave-owning son of a bitch. And I can't stand that. This is the United States of America. There was a Reconstruction afterward to heal the nation. And during that Reconstruction, everybody was pardoned of treason except Davis, I think, right?
With no pun intended, everything isn't always black and white in any conflict, right?
And that's just
there were good people fighting for the Confederacy, and there were bad people fighting for the Union. Robert E. Lee, the way I understand it, Abraham Lincoln asked Robert E. Lee to lead his armies, and Lee would have done it, except for he couldn't stomach the thought of fighting against his fellow Virginians. Therefore, he fought for the South. But were it not for that, he would have been a Union general.
Yes, a lot of officers that
and he was not pro-slavery the way I understand it. I don't know if Lee owned slaves.
No, he owned slaves. Okay. Have you ever been to Arlington National Cemetery?
No, I'd love to.
Okay. That is Robert E. Lee's plantation. They seized it from him after the war as reparations and turned it into a national cemetery. They took away his fortune. And one of the things he did right after the war was over, one of the times he went to church after war was over, a black person was up in the front there kneeling, praying. And Lee walked right next to this former slave, recently freed slave, and knelt down next to him and prayed with him. But people don't remember that either. They only remember the garbage that's been put out there by Hollywood and stuff. There were lots of people after the war that were bitter. They were bitter about having their property taken. They were bitter about all the money it cost them. They were bitter about the lives that were lost. They were bitter about a lot of things. And there were people that did evil things, like create the Ku Klux Klan. I am not forgiving that. But if we were going to heal as a nation, at that time, pardoning people and getting on with things was the best thing to do. And to this day, I still want our nation to be healed from that conflict. But what I see is our nation heading back towards another conflict like that, because we didn't learn from history, because we're erasing it, and because people don't know about all the underhanded things that went on. People don't see this. They don't see that. They just see what they want to see. They're offended by what they see because they don't understand what they see, because they don't take the time to study history. They don't take the time to appreciate it. I want to appreciate the fact that when somebody sees a statue, they're offended. All right, explain to me why. But I'm going to go ahead and dispel every myth that they've got that creates their offense. If they choose to continue to be offended, be offended. But I can tell you, you wanted to have the panel with somebody to have a perspective other than a white guy, because there's nothing but a bunch of white guys on a panel. All right, well, I can tell you, I got a little bit of appreciation because I'm the only Southerner on this panel. And I've had to go my whole damn life being told you were the bad guy. But if you study history, Confederacy wasn't the bad guy. And all kinds of people today are calling for states' rights. That's what the Confederacy wanted. They wanted states' rights. And that's what they got. And that's part of the reason they lost, is because they had a weak central government and strong state governments. And that's part of the reason they lost, because during a war, you need a strong federal government. But it's ironic.
And also you had the industrial North fighting against the agrarian South, and the resources and the money just wasn't there in the South.
Well, there were other things, yes, but I'm saying that was one of the things. But I don't know, for the past 3 years, I've heard people come on these shows on YouTube saying states' rights, states' rights, states' rights. Like, wait a minute, I want an apology, because you guys shoved it down my throat my whole life that states' rights are evil, that we need a strong federal government. Now that we got a strong federal government and it's screwing everything up, everybody wants state rights. Well, it's like, well, then I guess Confederacy was right. I would have rather seen slavery end gradually, voluntarily, and peacefully, because I think if that had happened, I think there would have been bloodshed, and there would have been a situation where we wouldn't have had a civil rights movement, because you wouldn't have had a bunch of bitter people.
I just don't think that would have ever happened when it was.
I do.
Wait, I want to hear.
I don't think so. I don't think I've ever in history seen any society, any culture that is enslaved another culture just willingly let them go because it was the right thing to do. Now, I know that there's a lot of nuance when it came to the Civil War.
Then you don't the history of the United States.
Part of the issue that people were fighting, and one of the reasons the South wanted to secede, the way I understand it, was because there was talk of abolishing the slave trade, which would have meant that they would have had to completely rethink all of their entire way of life. They would have had to pick their own cotton, grow their own tobacco. They wouldn't have had people to work the fields for no money. It would have cost them a lot more. I've thought about this often when I hear
it doesn't cost you anything. You've got to be kidding me. This is another Yankee misconception about slavery.
Sure, but hold on.
What is our
Yankee misconception? I've thought about the same. Hold on now. I've thought about this very same thing a lot when I hear people arguing that we need to allow a certain number of illegals into our country because of the cheap labor as far as working in the strawberry fields or doing the landscaping or whatever it is that people are doing along the border or in California. And that was the first thing I thought of is, well, that seems like probably the most asshole way to look at things is, oh my gosh, if we didn't have the illegals in California, who's going to mow our grass? Oh, heaven forbid you get out there and do it your own damn self. Heaven forbid you get out there and hoe your own fields, but that wasn't the way it was. And I know that's an oversimplification, but that was one of the things that would have threatened the entire economy of the South had the slave trade had to just end. They still would have been back to square one with a lot of other things too. Plus, we would have had a lot of slaves who did, and this did actually end up happening, that get displaced. All of a sudden, they don't have anywhere to go. They don't have any way to make money. So they were, even the slaves at the time, the emancipated slaves, they still came and had to work for less money than a lot of people, than the white people. I mean, everything wasn't wine and roses for anybody after this, right? But it makes me kind of wonder, again, are we repeating ourselves already to an extent? Are we not being a little bit divided, not necessarily for black slaves, but now brown slaves and Hispanic people coming across the border that, again, that sometimes people get treated the same way over and over again, right? Because we didn't learn. And that's kind of what I think that ultimately the point that you were trying to make is we didn't learn. And now it's coming back around to bite us again because we weren't smart enough to wise up the first time.
No, I'm talking about the division in the country and about people manipulating things, politicians manipulating the situation, and people using smoke and mirrors to explain what's really going on, or to justify what's really going on, and to create a situation where Americans want to fight Americans over principles, over their interests, over their culture, over their way of life, over their beliefs, over what they think is right and wrong. And it would always be better if we could work things out in a nonviolent fashion. From time to time, war is inevitable. It's necessary, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. I used to be in the war business. You think I'd be all about let's have war all the time, but I'm not. And you can glean a lot of positive things out of war. And sometimes war forces change faster than not going to war. But when you force change, there's ramifications that last a long time, because you put somebody's arm behind their back instead of letting them stick their hand out and shake yours. But if you didn't want to wait for that handshake, war's a quick way to get that arm behind that back.
Oh, I agree. And that's something that we all fight against, right? If we take this and move that same context over to a different topic for a second. Yes, Patriot in the Dark. I don't know if you can actually see the comments that I throw up on the screen here, but I did see your comment, and Patriot said, Every second matters. We open carry to put it out in view. To promote the conversation, our statute is the same. Now, I left that on the screen for a while because I wanted to make sure that I did address that comment when we were talking about the statues, but we've moved on. But it's the same thing, right? When we talk about as gun owners, we always talk about policing our own and having the conversation within our own ranks about, you know, safe storage and safe transport and things like that. And if we can actually, you know, do things right ourselves on our own, we don't need the government to pass a law forcing us to do the things that we already know to do to be safe, right? And so what you were just saying made me think about that. Is anytime that you force somebody into doing something, whether or not they were already going to do it, as Americans, we, again, at least as patriotic Americans, we have an inherent aversion to being told what to do, right? I mean, that's what the American patriot originally was. Don't tell me what to do. I would rather do my own thing. And I would rather do it my way. And so that's always going to rankle. That's always going to cause strife. And sometimes that does end up leading to war. It's how we got here. It did lead to the Civil War in that case too, when people were forced into doing things that they didn't want to do or weren't ready to do yet. So I do see what you're saying there. I think I do. Do I see what you're saying there?
I get you.
Okay. Well, I mean,
I understand.
Yeah, kind of. A lot of it really had to come down to money, but it was two different cultures. And one culture saying, we've got all the voting power, we're making all the rules, and you're going to do what we say, whether it fits in with your life or not, whether it fits in with your traditions, your economy, anything else or not. And if you look at what's happening politically in this country, we're having the same thing, where one side is a louder voice and they're saying, we're the only ones that are right. We're the only ones that are allowed to say anything. We're the only ones allowed to be angry, offended. We can do this. You can't do that. We're right. You're wrong. And it's happening again. Now, what's going to end up coming of that? I hope not a civil war. I'm not encouraging it. And I think that we have a better chance of avoiding it than actually getting anything out of one. I mean, who exactly are you going to go, you know, what are you going to do? Kill your neighbor? It's not going to be divided down a geographical line anymore. So I don't want a civil war. But that's what happened last time, is over time, bad feelings got stirred up to cover up the real reasons for the war. And I honestly think that we should have stayed two separate countries. And if we ever wanted to reunite, we should have put it to a vote somewhere in the future. But if I think that the United States would have been better off having a union and a confederacy for as long as it took to deal with the issue. And
sure, that would have changed the economy of both sides, because then all of a sudden we wouldn't have been able to get cotton, tobacco, things like that from the South without having to pay tariffs and things like that for it, or pay extra for it.
It's okay for the South to pay tariffs on northern stuff.
And the same thing would have happened for steel and everything else that came from the North that went to the South. You're right. It would have upset both economies had that been the case too.
It already did. The economy
but what they were
the North, not the South. That's part of the reason for the war.
But you know as well as I do that part of the reason that the Union didn't want to let the South secede was because it was going to turn their economy on its ear, both directions. The South would have lost a lot of things had they just abolished slavery, and they did lose those things anyway, as it turned out. And the North would have lost a lot of things had they just let the South secede, which you're right, they did end up losing a lot of things as it turned out, but they didn't know that at the time. But both sides were trying to maintain a status quo and make things better for themselves.
And so, that could happen. That could happen again with things that are going on in current events.
That's what's happening now. Yes. All right. Rogue Banshee, you have said out there the ruling class has been successful in making us fight each other instead of paying attention to what they're doing behind the curtain. Would you want to expound on that a little bit and just elaborate on what you mean when you say that?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to go into the whole history of how we have, you know, our ruling class. And I do say ruling class because politicians, their job is to be a politician. Politicians they weren't career politicians but then we made them career politicians, and now their job is to stay in power. And for me, it's they have us fighting ourselves, and they've been really good at pitting us against each other, so that way they can just go pass laws, and then they can consolidate their power even more. Because the more that we fight with each other, they can do stuff we're not paying attention. They're passing laws, they're attaching bills to other bills to get things passed, slipping things through. They're just doing what we allowed them to do, and instead of paying attention to that, we're worried about black versus white. I don't care who you are. You're an American. One thing that drove me nuts when I was in FFL, when people came in to fill out their 4473, there's a whole thing about race. What does that entire section of the 4473 have to do with your ability to own a gun?
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with it. But yet they have us so worried about what box do I check? And we shouldn't be even worrying about that stuff. We should be worrying about what they're doing. If we want to worry about our First Amendment rights, our Second Amendment rights, any rights that we have been given, I wouldn't even say given, that are our God-given rights, we shouldn't be fighting each other against those rights. We should be fighting our politicians and holding them accountable for chipping away at those rights. It goes back to the whole flag burning you were talking about earlier. Do I like people burning the flag? No, I hate it. It's to me, it's disgusting, but it is their right to do so. We need to start holding our politicians accountable for their actions and stop fighting with each other over stupid things.
Absolutely. Warsaw Patriot has said this so-called modern civil war that we keep hearing and fearing about will be like what happened in Europe in the Yugoslav wars. States fighting states, nothing but chaos. I can't say that I disagree with that, Warsaw Patriot.
Yeah, it's
going to be bad.
Yeah.
It's going to be bad. And New York Outcast says everyone was upset with the government. And I think you're meaning New York Outcast. I think you're meaning over the COVID thing. Everyone was upset with the government until the news changed the focus and fired thinking up. We're definitely getting played. I would have liked to get some of your thoughts in here in the panel, New York Outcast. And if you still want to join, feel free to jump in. You are definitely welcome to sound off. But if you don't want to, that's cool. That's fine too. But yeah, we're definitely getting played. Just look at some of the things that are still happening. Some of the laws that still get introduced. I know Congress isn't in session, but there are still a lot of state level laws that are getting put through right now, and even some I guess state level executive orders that are getting issued. Just going back to just being as gun owners, that are just completely terrible. And I can't help but think that there's a bigger push now than ever to start disarming people. It's crazy how when conflict starts to I guess rear its ugly head, I will say, in our country, a couple things happen. Number one, the people realize how little control the government actually has over your own safety or their own safety, their own being the people. And so look how many NICS checks we have done just in the last 3 months. Each one of the last 3 months broke the previous month's record. And each month is a new all-time record for NICS checks within the month. Now, we all know that doesn't necessarily equate to that many firearms sold, but it's that many NICS checks. And that's with the system being partially shut down in some places. So I think the numbers would be higher if everybody wasn't shut down, if everybody was open the way that they should be. So number one, we've got the people that are scrambling all of a sudden to arm themselves because they're finally aware. A lot of people have got their eyes open now that the government, for all their fake promises and all the smoke and mirrors and rainbows and unicorns that they've been blowing up your butt, they can't actually do anything to make you safe or keep you safe. And if they could, they can't be everywhere, and they can't always be there on time or in time to do anything. So number one, we've got the population is figuring out, though some of us knew this, a lot of people are finding out for the first time, and hopefully not finding out the hard way, but their eyes are getting opened, that maybe we need to be take a little more responsibility for our own safety and our own well-being. Number two, we've got the politicians that are scrambling more than ever to take away our very rights to do that and block. Well, they can't take away our rights as far as, God gave us the right, but they can block the exercise of those rights, and they can take away our ways to exercise those rights. And so if anything, that struggle, that conflict between the two is going to come to a head, at some point itself. I think that the race thing is going to be partially a catalyst, and I think that people are getting fired up and stirred up because when we've got people that are looking for reasons to be offended, race is one of the easiest ways to get offended, and people are getting conditioned for that right now. And so, yeah, anybody that thinks that as a general rule the population isn't getting played, you're wrong if you don't think that. And anybody that thinks that, well, maybe people are getting played, but not me, I don't know. I think we're all guilty to an extent of being played a little bit, or at least feeding into it. I know I am. Sometimes I get carried away on social media with some of the things that are going on, and I just need to tell myself, you know what, this is actually affecting your mood and your attitude, and I gotta just tell myself to leave it alone for a while and go do something healthy and productive, and get my head out of social media, because I can feel it affecting my mood sometimes. Now, that partially is me letting it happen, but that's still me being played, because that's the very thing that is the goal of the I guess the agents provocateur that are trying to accomplish these things. And if it works on me and I know it's happening, how much better is it going to work on the people that aren't even aware that they're getting played like that? So we can have a whole nother night's discussion again about just these conflicts and how the media and the politicians are leading us towards the path of our own destruction. Maybe that's what we'll do next week. But definitely the race thing is being used as a tool. I don't think that that's our issue. Our issue as a country, and the thing that we need to heal from, isn't necessarily that we're a racist country. I think our main issue, well, we have several, but that's only a small issue. And our issue is that we're getting divided because there are people that are trying to make it happen, and there are other people that are willing to let it happen because they're ready to go to war. I guess they're ready to put on their Hawaiian shirts and their plate carriers and go find some large house made out of ice, some big igloo or something. I don't know if you're supposed to say boogaloo on the air, but I'm with Squib. I will advocate 100% to avoid a conflict, avoid a shooting war where Americans shoot at Americans. I'm never going to be for that scenario. I think that there's always going to be ways that we can avoid a shooting war. And I think that the American patriots were against that scenario too. Unfortunately, things happen and they found themselves in a shooting war. Like it or not, it's go time. I fear that's what's going to happen one day in my country. Again, I don't want to see that, but this only works if we sit down and we have conversations. And this conversation maybe didn't go quite like I had originally imagined it, but if it sets up that conversation next week, maybe it's not a problem at all. Maybe this has been a good thing that's happened. The other thing I'd like to see, for those of you that are still with us or joining us late, the other thing I'd like to see is a continuation of this. This doesn't have to be the only time we talk about this. Maybe having this conversation will maybe this one will reach out to some people that say, hey, I'd like to sit down and talk about some of these things. And that's totally fine. If you want to do that. So that's where, you can reach out to us. You can email us while we're live at sandhillslive@gmail.com. We may or may not get those throughout the week. We're not going to check it much throughout the week. You can still catch us at sandhillsshooter@gmail.com as well. But if this is something that you want to talk about a live chat, go ahead and send it out to sandhillslive@gmail.com. And eventually we'll see that and get back to you on that. And see if we can maybe round up a few more people, and we can come back and revisit some of these topics. Just because we did it once doesn't mean that, having a conversation about the same topic with different people, it's going to be a new conversation. So I'm not opposed to that either. Having said all that, I think it's about time that we start wrapping up. But before I do, I know that some of us have spoken a little bit more than others, but I just want to open up the floor to those of you that maybe haven't been quite as vocal, or the rest, all of you on the panel. If there's anything else that you want to throw out there that's pertinent to anything we've covered tonight, that we would be remiss if we didn't cover it real quick before we close tonight. So we'll just open the floor up. I won't call on anybody specific.
Well, I had something that's been stewing in my brain that I heard today on another podcast while I was in the field.
Okay.
I heard Uber Eats, and I think this kind of falls underneath the not necessarily racism, maybe more prejudiced, maybe.
Okay.
But Uber Eats was going to waive their delivery fee for Black owners, but still charge everybody else the delivery fee on that. Now, I know that goes against the civil liberties that we have and then everything that's on the books, because you can't do that. And there'd be case lawyers and stuff jumping all over that left and right and they'd be getting sued. But even just them talking about
or would they, though? I mean, in this day and age, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe there's a judge that would actually uphold that or strike down the lawsuit and throw it out, because I mean, that's just it. We have gotten to the point where the pendulum is starting to swing clear the other direction. And we didn't really cover that much tonight, but
right. And that's kind of what I'm getting to.
I think, yeah. So I think what you're kind of meaning by that is that we have seen a whole lot of, instead of the white people oppressing the Black people, we've got a ton of white people right now that are wanting to apologize for things that they had nothing to do with.
Well,
go ahead.
Is it really that big of a deal? I mean, hold on. Do you think that Black people have been oppressed? Pat, this is you, right? You brought this up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, as companies, whether they're trying to pander.
Well, what's the big deal if they want to give Black people a discount?
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
That is real racism.
That is racism.
Gosh.
No, you don't have to be white to be racist, and that's the notion that is getting spread lately, and it has been for some time, but it's really bad right now. If you're not white, it doesn't matter what you say. You can't be taken as racist right now, which is total bullshit. Because you can be any gender, any race whatsoever, and be racist towards other races. It's not something that's exclusive to just white people. But the fact, if you're going to single out any single race and treat them differently, that seems to me like, first of all, a slap in the face, not only to everybody that's not that race, but that also seems like, hey, Black people, we know that you can't handle all the stuff that everybody else can handle, so we're going to try and make things easier for you because, well, you know what? We don't think that you should have it as rough because, I mean, how is that?
My only point is that I think it's a small thing that that they wanted to do. It's not that big of a deal just to let it go on that. And that's my point, was that
sure,
that's something they want to do, and I get it. But I think us arguing about it and bringing it up,
I think it sets precedent, though, because again, we look at a lot of different things, and let's say that there was a company that said, "Well, we want to not charge white people a delivery fee."
Right. I get that, but that goes back to my first comment was that there have been things that I don't have to put up with because of my skin color that black folks do have to put up with. And I think that it just, if you admit that in some form, there can be a bridge built to understand that some people have been oppressed. And that I think that, man, if a company wants to give a discount, I get the precedence that you're saying it sets. But I think we do
I
better.
think that if
to let
there
it
were
go.
actual laws in place recently that had just been struck down and we just had overturned Jim Crow or something like that,
Okay, I get your
that
point.
maybe you would have more of what you're saying would have more of a basis, but we have not had Jim Crow. We have not had segregation for a long time. Yes, there are still people alive that remember those days. There's not anybody alive that remembers the American slave days or the pre-war time, pre-Civil War here. Those folks are long since gone. All the slave owners and all the slaves are dead now. And I don't know when my family exactly came to this country. I do know that, as far as I know, all my ancestors came to this country after the 1860s. So I know that I don't have any American slave owning history in my family. I'm not okay with being treated like I'm a bad guy either. Squib, I understand where you're coming from. I've never thought about what it's like to grow up in the South and be told you're the bad guy. I get it. That's one of the things that I wanted to have this conversation for, is to get a new perspective.
But let me give Duke some perspective here. Duke, did you kill those people in Las Vegas from the Mandalay Bay 32nd floor window? Did you do that?
Nope.
You didn't. Okay. So are you going to apologize to the victims because you own guns?
Or destroy
No,
your
man.
guns?
No, but I get where you're coming from, and
Okay.
that's irrelevant to the point that I was trying to
think
make.
it was very relevant.
No, I think it isn't, because
It's
the point of this chat was supposed to be, from my understanding, was of talking about some racism things, and it was turned into a Southern pride chat, and that's what I'm disappointed at.
and
There's a lot of Southern pride in this chat, which is not going to help in any way or form. Any minority who is listening to this is going to suddenly want to come aboard this platform or a platform of the Second Amendment, and that's my concern, man.
That's a valid concern.
I didn't want it to turn into a Southern pride chat, but as soon as the whole statue and then the whole, slavery and Confederacy and all this stuff, every single time it comes into and I don't like that coming into the problem with America today. But the benefit of that, the positive side effect is we have a history lesson to learn from. And if people would take the time to actually learn the real history leading up to and during, they might see some similarities today. They might be a little worried.
And I understand that, man. And I'm not mad at you. I'm just disappointed in the movement of the chat, which was not anything that well, I'm trying to be pleasant with you, but if any minority is listening to this, I'm telling you, they've been swayed not in the direction of anything that supports the Second Amendment or this. And that's what I'm disappointed in.
I don't look at people that are different than me as weaker. Okay, you're condescending to people that are different than you. I am not. They are equal to me. Okay,
just hold on now. Duke is not condescending. Duke is just asking a question of what's so bad about what you and I consider to be condescending, and maybe Duke doesn't consider that, and that's okay too. All right, because again, everybody's viewpoint, everybody gets a chance to share their viewpoint, and the whole point of this is that we're not going to say that one person is. That whether or not I disagree with you doesn't make you wrong or me right. Okay. I'll still say some things are bullshit, but that's my opinion. That's not me saying that it's fact. So what I do want to point out before we run out of time, because I'm going to have to call this on time, but New York Outcast, for those of you that aren't aware, New York Outcast is I guess what should I say? Mixed race New York Outcast. Is that okay to say? Again, this is something that I don't even know the right words all the time, the right nomenclature, and I'm not meaning to offend anybody. But if I do, I don't care. Let's have a conversation about, maybe the right things to say that don't piss people off. But New York Outcast says the white half of me is pissed about that, and the black half is insulted. And even though I don't know what it's like to be black, I think that the only way that you can actually legitimize yourself or legitimize a group of people is to not give them preferential treatment based on things that are outside of their control. Whether it's good or bad preferential treatment, the color of one's skin should have no bearing on whether or not they get treated differently, whether it's better or worse. I think that treating somebody better based on the color of their skin is equally racist, and it's maybe not as rooted in evil, and it may be rooted in good intentions. But it makes me think of the people here last week that put a black square on their Facebook or Instagram picture, a black square. Look at me. Hey, black people, I just want you to know that me, Mr. White Guy, I got a black square up there, and you should be happy. Aren't you grateful now that I put up a black square and I support you, black people? Because look at my black square. Look, black people, look at me. You should be grateful that I did this. Fuck, that just pisses me off. I didn't put up a black square because I'm not going to pander or act like I had anything to do with any of the bad shit that happened in the past in my country, because I didn't. And I didn't own any of the people that are alive right now. And I don't think that it is anything but condescending to put up a black square and make it look like I am, all of a sudden, hey, it's okay for you to like me. Don't look at me like I'm a bad guy just because I'm white. Don't hate me because I'm white. Well, let's just talk about, hey, I'm a person. I'm a dude. He's a dude. She's a dude. We're all dudes, or however that goes in Good Burger. So, I mean, let's just all be dudes, okay? If we give people preferential treatment based on the color of their skin, which they have no control over, then, I mean, it's not right no matter how we do it. Whether we give things that they don't deserve or we don't give them things that they do deserve, it's equally bad. And it still teaches people that skin color is a reason to single people out and treat them differently. And that's not the world that I want to live in. And God forbid that if I ever have kids, that they grow up in a world where people are still judged on the color of their skin. I don't want that for them. That's all. Sorry. And I know that both of you have very good points that you're trying to make. But at the same time, it's just, I am never going to get behind something that says that, hey, just because somebody has a color of their skin, that we're going to treat them differently. That, to me, is what racism is, or colorism, I guess, or pigmentism. We all have the same skin. We all have the same melanin, just different amounts of it. So I'm okay with seeing color. I'm not saying that I don't see color. Okay. I want to talk about how this person is black and this person is mocha and this person is caramel and this person is pink. I don't think that we should shy away from something like that. I just don't think that we should treat them differently. I think we should celebrate the fact that even though we're all people, we're all unique. I'm okay with that idea. God built us different. God didn't make any one of us the same. Even those of us that are all, white people, we're all different too. God didn't build us all the same height, the same shape, the same color, the same anything, because he didn't want things to be boring. So it's cool that we have differences, and it's cool to talk about what makes us different. And it's cool to see what happens when, a black person and a white person fall in love and they have kids, and some of them have different colored skin than others, even within the same family. Some people have more melanin and some people have less melanin. I think it's neat. And I don't know if it's okay for me to even say that. And that's what's fucked up. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because I want to talk about things like that. Those of you that don't know, my wife and I have a DJ business, and on weekends, starting finally in July, we can go back to work and DJ some wedding dances. And when I have a client who's black, and I always have a conversation that, whenever we play music, it's family friendly and it's wedding day appropriate. So it's not going to be any gangster rap, fuck the police, things like that. But why am I afraid to say that when I have a black bride or a black groom in my living room talking about this? Why is it all of a sudden I think that I'm going to offend them? Why is it not okay for me to say the same thing that I tell everybody and treat everybody the same way? Why am I all of a sudden afraid to treat somebody the same way? Because they don't know me and they don't know that I tell everybody the same thing. And that's fucked up. And I don't like that feeling. And if that makes me racist, then I guess I'll have to own up to that one day, but I don't think it does, because I don't think that I'm any better, that my skin makes me any better than anybody else. So with that, I think it's time that I calm down. We're going to just let everybody sign off here and say goodnight. And Duke, I understand what you're saying, that, you know, the chat, like I said, it didn't necessarily go the direction I was thinking that maybe it was going to go, or that I wanted it to. I'm hoping that we haven't necessarily pushed people away. Again, just because one of us, and it could have been me, just because one of us said something that maybe you didn't like, isn't necessarily a reason to shut down communication. If anything, it proves the need that we need to sit down and have the communication, and let's get these things out in the air and talk about them. So I'm hoping that anybody out there that hears this is willing to share it and invite people to come in, even if I need to be, if you think I need to be straightened out. You might not change my mind, but I want to know your perspective. I want to know where people are coming from that not only don't look and sound like me, but that disagree with me. I'm okay with listening. All right. And I want to have those conversations, because we're never going to heal this nation, and we're never going to bridge this gap and end this divide if we can't talk about things, and we can't just sit down and have these discussions together. So that's all I want, I guess. So with that being said, we'll just go back around the horn and see if we can, if I can do this in reverse order that I had everybody. So I think the last one that we had in here overall was Pat. So Pat, thanks for joining us. Anything you want to sign off with?
No, just wanted to say thanks for inviting me tonight, and definitely stirred up a lot of conversation tonight, which is a good thing, which is a very good thing, because if we don't listen and we don't talk to each other, then we can't start to sort things out. And just to be a smartass, I'm an identical twin.
That's right. I knew that. That's right. And if I am not mistaken, Pat's not the name you go by on Facebook, right? Because I can never even remember who I'm talking to or who I'm looking at on Facebook. So I get you guys mixed up.
Yeah, no, that is me. That's just my my other handle.
Yep, so. I got you. Nope, that's cool. All right.
And not misspell Republican. It is an inside joke from back in high school. It is Republican.
Okay, then. Gotcha. Okay. Well, thanks for being here, Pat. Let's move over to, before I go on, I've got to just mention this comment. Patriot in the Dark. It says, you want to know something funny? You're all black to me. Wow. That was some dark humor, Patriot. For those of you that don't know, Patriot in the Dark was not born blind, but he did go blind later in life, and he can't see anything. So he really is a patriot. He really is in the dark. Anyway, Travis, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, man. No, I just think that this is a good discussion to have, and we're able to do this in a way that, what I like about the Sandhills is you moderated this in a way that it didn't have to turn into a screaming match, which is what it turns into everywhere else. I'm not saying our podcast with our little circle of friends, but just in the media, it's good to just have these discussions, whether we agree or not. But I think we can learn from it and start to see things from other people's perspective. I know I am and have.
Yeah, those of us that have been around the old gun channels days and know some of those live chats where they just turn into a flat out screaming match, and the topic gets forgotten, and I just turn them off. I don't even listen anymore. So hopefully I didn't lose anybody tonight. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just want to say this was a good discussion. I think it's worth the time for people to listen to, and I hope other people out there of all kinds of different backgrounds get a chance to listen to this, because I think there's a lot that we can all learn from each other. So it's good stuff, man. Thanks.
You bet. Thanks for joining. Yep. Duke, it's okay to be passionate, and thank you for joining us and bringing your perspective.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it. Everybody on the panel here. It was fun tonight. Thank you, sir.
You betcha. Thanks for being here. All right, Rogue Banshee, I am glad that you joined us tonight. And if you'd like, you can come on in and hang out with us more often if you want to. That's cool with me.
Right. It was definitely a trial by fire.
If you want to, maybe you don't even want to come back.
No, it's not that at all. I actually kind of enjoyed myself. You guys saw me on the camera, and I'm just sitting there, just listening to you guys go back and forth, and it proves tonight's conversation proves that it's not it's not a black versus white or tan versus brown or whatever color. It's look, we're all Americans. We're all have different opinions. We're all individuals. We just need to sit down and talk. We don't want other people to dictate that conversation for us. Having that conversation openly between each other, that's how we're going to understand each other. Listening to Duke and Squib go back and forth, and they're two different sides of the same coin. And understanding where they're coming from, that's part of opening up and talking and trying to get past things. Let's not let anybody else have this conversation. Let's all have this conversation together.
Yeah, exactly right. And out there, New York Outcast, hey, thanks for the trophy. I'll take it. He thinks I might get the trophy for being wound up. I say I'm a grumpy old man, and you guys don't always get to see all of the things that my wife gets to see week in and week out when we're not live on the air. Typically, I want these to be chats that you can play with the kids in the room and let the kids listen to them, other than tonight. So, tonight I actually just took my filter off. That's all.
Sandhills after hours.
That's right. That's right. All right, Squib, you were the first one in, so we'll let you sign off last. And your phone has lasted. Well, you've been in and out, but your phone is still with you. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, the phone didn't put up the alarm that said it was overheating. It just dropped me out 3 times. About your last statement there, I think you said it well. As far as I agree with your sentiment in the first part. That's why I'm so angry. That's why I'm so passionate. This shouldn't even. I'm glad that we can have a discussion, and I think we need to have discussions. This is something we shouldn't even be discussing. We should be discussing other things right now, only because this shouldn't be an issue, but it is. And the second half of your statement just goes to prove I'm still the bad guy, and I've got to go the rest of my life hearing that.
No, I don't think so. I don't think you're the bad guy. I think that again, you grew up in a place where you got told that everybody in the South maybe was the bad guy, but you didn't fight against the North. You didn't fight in the Civil War. You didn't own slaves. So again, you can feel like that if you want to, but you could also choose to say, look, you might think that at face value, but let me tell you something. I might have been born in the South. I might have grown up there, but I've never owned another human being in my life. And I detest the notion of it. And I've been to around the world, and I have fought against injustices on more than one occasion. And you can think what you want about me, but I know the truth. And dude, if you want to think that, then I think you'd be justified in saying that to anybody that tries to say otherwise. And I'm not just pandering to you because you're, meaner than me either, or a better shot. So, but you probably are a better shot. So anyway, but no, I won't speak for anybody else. I don't think that anybody who grew up in the South is a bad person because they grew up in the South. I don't think anybody who's proud of the South is a bad person just because they're proud of the South either. So if just being proud of where you came from makes you a racist, then I don't know. I'm proud of Nebraska, and I don't think that makes me racist, but it's okay to be proud of who you are and where you came from. And let me just end with this. Sometimes people make mistakes. Sometimes people completely get it wrong, but everybody can learn from their mistakes and decide not to repeat them. Everybody can decide that what they did was bad and resolve to not do it again or not do it anymore. And that's part of what being human is. And that's part of what this ride called life really is making mistakes, learning from them, and not doing them anymore. And so just because somebody maybe did bad things in the past, said bad things in the past, thought bad things in the past, that doesn't necessarily mean that they all they say they think those same things still today. So even if somebody did grow up in an area where they were taught how to be racist and then later on they learned that, hey, this is not cool, I don't want to be a dick anymore, then I'm okay with them taking steps to no longer act that way and be that way. So hopefully we all can have that same mindset too, that, you know, even if I'm saying things right now that are terrible in somebody's mind, if later on I become convinced that those were terrible, I can still change. I can still do things better. I do things that are wrong all the time, but that doesn't mean that I'm doomed to always be bad or do bad. That just means that I've got work to do, which that just means that I'm human, which we all are. And I believe we were all built by the same dude, the same God. And he obviously doesn't want us all to look the same, act the same, feel the same, think the same, or he could have made us that way. This is what he wanted. We just got to learn how to get along with each other. And that's really all I wanted to do tonight. So with that, let me see if I can grab the list. And I did. So out there in the chat tonight, we had, again, a good showing of people. Again, I said this early, but if you're joining us later and you're not commenting, then we don't know you're here. We cannot see you, and then we don't get to say hi to you at this time of the night. So thank you for joining us, Justin Gibbons, G23, the Rogue Banshee, Agorizer, Carolina EDC Reviews, Mystic Guns, Emily L., the 402 Outdoorsman, 2 Live Mood, Jay Brown, Blue Steel 44, Rick Nethery, Travis T, Defense Dad, Guy That Comments, Keith Gregory, Midnight Range TM, Warsaw Patriot, Kingpin, Patriot in the Dark, Vanessa Kitty, Ghost Tactical, Schofield 63, Tara Smith, Philo, Jackers 56, Seven Wonders, Mike, the Poor Conservative, Patrick, Travis P11, New York Outcast, Ozzy Osbourne, 9mm, Joe Schneider, not to be confused with Bo Duke, John Schneider, M. Gabriel, Net Flutter, David Ramirez, and all of you who chose not to comment and let us know that you were there. Thank all of you for joining us. On behalf of Squibload, the Rogue Banshee, Duke Liberty, Travis P11, Pat Hirsch, Sandhills Sweetheart, and myself, thank you all so much for joining us. Again, I know I say this every week, but it's true. Without you, we don't have a podcast. We don't have a reason to have a podcast. We could all just get together on a Zoom chat and argue with each other, and it wouldn't be worth anything. So hopefully we have maybe opened a few people's minds, or at least made you think. Maybe we've cemented what you already thought. Maybe we've made you think along a different line. Maybe we have done none of the above. But if you liked this chat, please share it. Please click the thumbs up and let YouTube know you care. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. If you haven't gone and found us on Facebook, please do so. Facebook.com/SandhillsShooter with no space in there, but 2 S's in the middle. And I think that's all I need to say. So with that, we love you all. God bless you. Thank you for joining us, and get off my lawn.